that we were able to get through pretty much all of the major contours of the school of realism. And what I like to do every so often, just to make certain that I'm making sense and that you're paying attention, I like to play a little game here that we call, What Did We Learn Last Time? Real simple thing. So just as a little review, just so you can give me some peace of mind, what did we get out of our coverage of realism yesterday, if we got anything out of realism at all? Yes?
That the primary actor on the world stage is the state.
All right, the primary actor on the world stage is the sovereign state. Very good. Okay?
That it's only always business, and that that alliances are only temporary.
Okay, I know what you're saying, that it's, well, what's only business? What is only business? So you don't want to say the cliched statement without making certain that you're being exact in what you mean. I know what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
So what exactly is strictly business? Politics. And more specifically, what kind of politics?
Power politics?
Power politics where?
War?
Not specifically just war, but not just specifically alliances, but
In the international arena.
in the international arena, which of course can include war, alliances, power politics. So when we talk about, politics is strictly business, it's politics in the international arena. Domestic politics, where does domestic politics come in realism? Technically, actually that's not that bad of an answer. Nowhere. They are. They're there, but does it really matter what type of government a state is in a realist paradigm? No, it really doesn't matter. Can you be democratic? Sure. Can you be authoritarian? Why not? Can you be absolute monarch? Sure, why not? It doesn't matter. Okay? So when we talk about politics being strictly business, nothing is personal, and that's where war comes in, alliances and everything else, it's at the international front. All right, what else did we learn about realism?
All states exist in a state of anarchy.
All states exist in a state of anarchy. Very good. But anarchy means what? What does anarchy mean?
Lack of government?
Lack of any type of overarching international government. What is anarchy, or what should anarchy not be synonymous with?
Chaos.
Chaos. Of course it can be, but it's not always. All right? So there's a difference between anarchy and chaos. Anarchy is just simply the lack of any overarching authority. Very good. All right, what else did we learn? What's that? The main concern of a leader should be security and survival. Sure, not bad. As a matter of fact, you kind of alluded to one of two very important buzzwords that are paramount throughout the entire study of realism. In fact, if we were to really say that realism is three things, first thing that you mentioned is that states the primary actors. Cool. There's two other things, two other important things, and they kind of go hand in hand together.
Security and power are
Security.
balancing against one another.
Absolutely. States are in constant pursuit of both power and security, and the two are mutually dependent upon each other. Power increases one's security. Security allows a state to increase its power. Okay, very good. If you got all of that, you're in relatively good shape. Now, what I would like to then do today is continue on that discussion by focusing on two readings: Thucydides, History of the Peloponnesian War, and selections from Machiavelli the Prince. If there is time at the end, I would like to start, and I know that I'm not going to finish, but I'd like to at least start our discussion of security dilemma. If we can't get to that today, don't worry about it. We will reconvene on Monday and do security dilemma as well as Mearsheimer's article. And then you can go off into your recitation. While we're at it, let's pass around the ye old attendance sheets. And I so like how it went last time around, so keep up the good work there. Okay, so let's begin with Thucydides. How many of you heard of, or maybe even read, selections from the History of the Peloponnesian War before this class? A few people. Okay. It's a pretty long read. although it's fairly easy to understand. Can anybody give me a brief recap, or at least a brief synopsis of what the Peloponnesian Wars were? Like, what happened? Why did they begin? What was the whole reason behind it? Or better yet, if you don't know the reason, who were at least the two major powers? That should be pretty easy.
Athens and Sparta.
Athens and Sparta. Okay? Were they on the same side or opposing sides? They're on opposing sides. Okay. Both Athens and Sparta were regarded as the two main powers. And when you think about it, classical Greece was really a collection of city-states. So Thucydides' history of this war, and it's, again, less the war than the allegories and the examples that we can still apply in modern times. Consider the city-states to be the equivalent of modern states. So in this case, Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Syracuse, and others basically had their own army, their own set of laws, their own governments, in some cases their own constitutions, and most importantly, their own armies. Okay? So all of them were effectively independent states, except their territories consisted of little more than their urban surroundings. But for the point of moving forward, Athens and Sparta were the two main belligerents. And Athens, if it was known for one major military advantage, Athens was known for what? What was Athens' military expertise? What did Athens have?
Its navy.
It had a navy. The Athenians were regarded as having the largest, strongest, and most organized navy, not only among the Greek city-states, but among the Eastern Mediterranean. Sparta, on the other hand, and this should be pretty easy for you, because we even get an adjective out of this today, Sparta was known for what capability? Athens had a navy, Sparta had what?
An army.
An army. Not only just an army, but the army. So, Sparta basically had the army, Athens had the navy. Now you think if the two put their powers together, they would have one effective fighting force. What ended up happening is, of course, the two fall on opposing sides for a previously happening event. Okay? Prior to him writing this stuff down, 300 just ended. Okay? The Persians were defeated, and what ends up happening is each of these city-states acquires a certain degree of military capability and political hegemony. And for a brief period of time, there was what we call a balance of power among these city-states. And I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but it's worth asking again. What do you understand balance of power to be? What is balance of power? Because this is another term that we're going to have to get familiar with over the next few days and weeks here. What is balance of power? What do you understand balance of power to be? Yes.
Well, in terms of what we learned yesterday.
In terms of what you understand it to be, or better yet, if you really want to impress me, what you got from the class yesterday.
That the stronger, bigger powers usually rule and the weaker countries go in place.
Fair enough. That much is certain. That's Thucydides' more philosophical understanding, right? The strong do what the strong do, and the weak just have to ride it out. Fair enough. But we can take this a little bit further. Let's see if we can look at this more from an academic point of view.
A balance in power of military strength.
Explain.
So these city-states, since they gain power through the war, they'll have a equally strong army, and it would be, like, from a realist perspective, it would be beneficial to go to war with each other, because you can't have one easy defeat, analyze their cost benefit.
Okay, so you're sort of applying a numerical ratio or a numerical order between the various powers and capabilities of each of these city-states, correct? Okay, now if you think about that from, let's say, a mathematical standpoint, for the sake of argument, Athens and Sparta are the two most powerful city-states within the region. As such, they see themselves as rivals. Okay? If you're number one on the totem pole, who is your biggest rival? Number two. And number two is always trying to kick number one out and be number one. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can go about maintaining your position. You can constantly go to war and keep number 2 down. But that's costly and oftentimes risks losing resources. So the next thing to do is to form alliances. Now, think of it like this. If Athens and Sparta form alliances with a number of other city-states, those city-states would effectively delegate or pool their relative power and capability to that alliance. So let's say that Athens has a power of, I don't know, +5, just by itself. And Sparta has a power of +4. The goal here is to zero-sum out. A balance of power is where both sides neither side has the capability of defeating the other. So if Athens has +5 power, Sparta has +4, what does Sparta need to do in order to achieve balance of power? It needs to at least form an alliance with one other city-state with +1. Okay? And that gets 0. But here's the thing, that rarely ends up happening. Forming alliances provide relative capabilities back and forth. So to move the story along, Athens and Sparta develop an intricate alliance system among their various client states, to the point where there is a relatively equal distribution of power between the Athenian side and the Spartan side. What usually ends up happening is countries or city-states that declare their neutrality at one point or another decide they're going to go one way or the other, upsetting the balance. And how the Peloponnesian War started was exactly that. There was a city-state, Corcyra, that decided that it was no longer going to be neutral, but it was trying to weigh its options. Which alliance should it form? Should it go with the Athenians? Should it go with the Spartans? Both Athenian and Spartan delegates went to Corcyra and basically said, hey, join us, you get an awesome navy. No, don't listen to them. Join us, you get a kick-ass army. It doesn't matter where Corcyra went. The point is Corcyra chose one alliance over the other, which of course upsets the balance. Eventually, a war breaks out because of misperceptions of what the other side is doing and a proverbial arms race. Eventually, we get to the one section of where we're going to be reading, the Melian dialogue. And the reason why I give you this, and because out of the 300-plus page text, this one section, probably more than others, explains a good number of strengths as well as weaknesses of the realist paradigm. And I'll give you the following examples. Okay? As I've said, Thucydides' writing is, to a degree, a classic model of modern-day power politics. Okay? Modern-day power politics, security dilemmas, the balance of power, and most importantly, diplomatic oversight. So the one thing that we don't take too seriously in the realist camp is that hegemonic states oftentimes risk overplaying their hand. And this is ultimately what happened to Athens. Athens was the most powerful city-state, not just because of its navy, but because of its diplomacy. And you got to think about it like this. If Athens has a navy, they also control the waterways, and by default, they control the paths of market. They control the commercial trade routes, which means that Athens is also the richest and the most developed. One would think that Athens would be the most prudent in all of this. Not to all of a sudden jump to the end of the movie. But who wins the Peloponnesian War? Athens or Sparta? Who wins?
Sparta.
Sparta wins. Athens loses. Athens loses the war. Okay? And you might think to yourself, how did that happen? Okay? Largely because of what Thucydides argues is Athens' own hubris. Athens' own overextension of resources. Athens' commitment to wars that it should not have fought. Its downfall was not one decisive military defeat, but more so a loss by military attrition, a loss of resources, and most importantly, a loss of allies. And Milos is regarded as one of the shatter points of this downfall. Milos was officially a colony of Sparta, but had decided to ride out the war by not engaging. Right? So it was, for the most part, a glorified neutral state, which was all but forgotten by Sparta. Milos had been able to, for at least a few years, take care of its own affairs without being interrupted, without being interfered with. Okay? What ends up happening is that Athens, one day, sails into its harbor, calls forth its diplomatic heads of state, and tells them, hang on a second here, guys. We've just discovered something. You guys are neutral. We can't have that. And the Melians are like, well, what do you mean? We're neutral. We're not bothering you. The Athenians turn around and say, well, we have a reason behind challenging your neutrality. Oh, and by the way, I came with an army behind me. Well, not really an army, but a navy. You see all those boats behind me? Yeah, they're loaded with cannons and guns and stuff, so I'm going to make you an offer that you can't refuse. Literally, you really shouldn't refuse this. Because it's either join up with us, or we could, if we really want, just invade you, conquer you, take all of your goods, kill all of your people, and sell the rest of you people into slavery. So it's kind of, damned if you do, damned if, sort of a thing like that. So I'm just going to tell you this much right now. We're going to give you an opportunity to join our alliance system without actually having to lose any, bloodshed. But if you say no, we're going to invade and we're going to conquer you. So it's either join us or be destroyed. The Melians turn around and they say, well, wait a minute, we like our neutrality. Why can't we just stay neutral? The Athenian delegation responds and says, that's just not how things are. And from here we get a lot of the understandings of philosophical realism. That type of understanding that the strong do certain things. The weak just need to also acknowledge their position on the totem pole. Taken directly from the text, the standard of justice depends on the equality of power to compel, and that in fact the strong do what they have the power to do, and the weak accept what they have to accept. In other words, the Athenians feel that they are completely justified in forcing their own policy on a third-party state, simply because might makes right. We have the guns, we have the ships, we have the power, you have nothing. The other rationale is that as the strong state, as the power in the region, we not only have a certain set of options, additional options, that we can resort to, but we are almost compelled to do that. Now, maybe if it wasn't a war, we wouldn't care. But because we are at war, we need to force your hands. That itself is classical realism. The moral that goes behind that is simply, what's good for the region is good for Athens, and vice versa. What's good for us, the power, should, just by default, be good for everyone else. So it's actually good for you, Milos, to ally with us. In fact, you should almost be thankful that we are giving you this opportunity to ally before we actually go to war, before we open fire. We can just simply destroy you, but we're not going to do that. We're going to give you an opportunity to join up with us. Melians go back and forth over this. They talk about independence. They talk about justice. They talk about freedom. They talk about morals. The Athenians are just kind of sitting there waiting for them to finish talking. And the Athenians respond and say, that's all fine and good, but this has nothing to do with international politics. It has nothing to do. This is all business. If we were on friendly terms with you, if we allowed you to remain neutral, this is the thing, if we allowed you to remain neutral, everyone else in the region would say, hey, wait a minute, why did I have to succumb to Athenian hegemony? Why did I have to sign up for that? As a matter of fact, if we allow you to be neutral, that's a sign of us being weak. It's not us being friendly. It's not us being generous. Screw that. That's a sign of our weakness, that we actually allow someone else to go about their own daily business. Your hatred of us, you could almost translate that into your fear of us as well, is a direct evidence of our power. The very fact that we dominate you, the very fact that you subject yourselves to us, is all the evidence that we need to show that we're the hegemonic power and you're not. Oh, and by the way, you're an island. What do you plan on doing? You know, if you were a land power, that might be one thing, but oh, wait a minute, you're an island. You're a complete island. We don't even have to ask you this. You know, we can just blockade you. We don't even have to open fire. We could, if we really wanted to, just lay siege to you. Because we've got more supplies on our ships for our sailors than you have supplies behind your city walls. You guys are going to starve before we do. Because if we run out of food, we've got the supply line going all the way back to Athens. Okay? So therefore, it's particularly important that you remain under our influence. An island power? Hell, Spartans don't have ships. Spartans walk wherever they want to go to. And it's not a fair fight. We don't even want to go to war with you because this war will be over in 5 minutes. We're not interested in genocide. We're just simply interested in taking you over. Okay? And we don't care about, you know, the rights of man, and we're not interested really in, you know, who's stronger or what. I mean, we are. We have the guns. We have the final say. Melians keep going back and forth over this by saying, you know, again, well, you know, we put our hope in the future. We put our hope that Sparta will come to our rescue. We put our hope in the idea that the laws of freedom and the laws of sovereignty will overcome the natural order of domination. The Athenians are listening again, and they're like, that's actually kind of funny. Good for you. You almost make me laugh there. Okay? Hope? Hope is nothing if you have nothing to fall back on. Remember, you're an island. Last I checked, Spartans don't swim. So what are you hoping for? Huh? What are you hoping for? Go ahead. Oh, you know what? Here, I'll wait 5 minutes. Let's see if hope comes. Didn't come? Right, okay. So it's either this or nothing. Look, guys, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this is just the laws of nature. The laws of nature dictate that the powerful can do whatever they can. We didn't make this up. Okay? We're not setting the rules here. We're just simply following it. We're just simply going along with that. Oh, and you know what? You do the exact same thing. If in a parallel universe the roles were reversed, you'd be knocking on our door telling us to surrender, telling us to submit. So don't give us this whole notion of victimhood and sovereignty. Yeah, no. Okay? If you had the power, you'd be doing the exact same thing, okay? And don't think Sparta is going to help you. You know what? Because I just phoned them. You could be totally lying, you know. I just got off the phone with Sparta. You know what? You guys are too remote to make any effective defense. The Spartans have cut their losses. They know what they can defend, and they know what's kind of peripheral. You would be considered too costly to defend. As a matter of fact, you'd be considered a minor setback for Sparta if we were to take you over. So they're not coming to your rescue. Okay? They realize that Milos is not defensible. Okay? So if you're sitting there waiting for someone else to defend you, it ain't gonna happen. What Thucydides shows us here is probably the most blatant example of raw power over a smaller entity. And the idea that self-help is one's first and sometimes last and only line of defense. Don't expect others to come to your help. It may happen, but it may not. Are you willing to take that risk? The Athenians are saying Sparta is not going to come to your aid. Okay? The other thing that we understand about realism in this case is that the international system may be comprised of sovereign states, but there is absolutely no evidence to suggest that all of these states have equal capabilities. Some are clearly more powerful than others. And if we accept the understanding that the international system is anarchic, which means that there's really no check or balance, there's no audit, there's no executive authority, those states with greater capabilities can basically do whatever they want. They can do whatever they want. Okay? Parallel that to the present. You know, you can't put a cop on every corner. And even if you did, you can't guarantee that every police officer is going to objectively interpret the law. It's painfully obvious in many places that there are some people who can buck the system much easier than others. I'm not even talking about racial differences or anything else like that. I'm just simply talking about who you know and what your connections are. You get pulled over for speeding in a town, and, you know, what's your first line of defense? Well, you be nice to the cop. Maybe he'll let you off. Maybe, maybe not. You flash your PBA card. You know, my Police Benevolent Association card. That's like my get-out-of-ticket-free card. Sometimes it works. Other times it doesn't. If that doesn't work, drop a name. Maybe your father's brother's nephew's cousin's former roommate happens to be the police chief or whatever it is. Right? That may work. Who knows? Okay? The thing is that that does happen in the real world. And that means that power capabilities are different for each person, or in this case, each state. Those that have greater capabilities are going to abuse that. Those that don't are the ones that get abused. So, stand up to one's equals. Behave with deference towards one's superiors. Milos should have saw the writing on the wall. Here's where the wheels come off the wagon. But treat one's inferiors with moderation. Milos refuses. So the Athenians open fire. It's not a fair fight. But Milos isn't so much defeated as it is destroyed. There's a difference. It's one thing to defeat whatever ragtag militia force defends the country. It's another thing to defeat the army, force conscription, and integrate their resources into your alliance system. It's something else entirely to burn it all to the ground. Right? Milos was destroyed. The male population was almost all put to the sword. Women and children were sold off into slavery. So I said that Athens loses the war. And why? Not because of Athens' hubris over its relationship to Milos, but because of what happens afterwards. Milos is destroyed. And as such, what ends up happening is that Milos becomes a rallying cry for other would-be neutral states. All of a sudden, rally towards Sparta. A few years go down the road, Athens runs out of allies, runs out of resources, runs out of manpower. Athens loses the war by attrition. By all military standpoints, Athens should have won, but it lost. So we get a lot of lessons out of just simply this dialogue. The power relationship between states, the capabilities between strong states and weak states, but also a final warning, a warning of leadership, and that's where Machiavelli then comes in. A warning of leadership. You may be able to get away with a lot of stuff as the most powerful state in the region. However, you still have to act with certain moderation. You can dominate, but don't be a tyrant. You be a tyrant, and suddenly that delicate alliance system completely goes against you.